Yeah, let me also actually just get the chat open just in case people have questions as we go. I'll make sure that I can address those. So feel free to use that while I'm talking. But yeah, like I said, I'm here to talk to you about mental health in the games industry in general, which is what the charity Safe in Our World focuses on. If we have a little look at this page, we can see who we are as a charity. So, as it says there, our main goal is to foster worldwide mental health awareness, not only in the industry, but also in the wider community of gamers. Um, the way in which we do that is kind of twofold with those different aspects of video games. So we work a lot with the community to provide them with resources and support, to share information, and I think importantly not just clinical information but also I guess like personal experience stories and games that cover this topic, and kind of talk about mental health in such a way that it's easy for people to understand and empathize. And then we also work with the industry to advocate for better mental health and wellbeing support through our Level Up Mental Health program, which is what Snappy Gurus are partnered with us on. In terms of kind of how and why we're here, back in 2017, a group of people from the games industry who'd been in the industry for quite a long time, now our founding trustees, essentially were talking about how there are a lot of issues that are very unique to this industry in terms of crunch, imposter syndrome, just being kind of more prevalent because of the type of industry this is and the type of work that we do. And they kind of realized like there isn't an organization or there isn't support that is looking specifically at some of the very unique challenges of this industry. So they decided to found Safe in Our World. We were launched on World Mental Health Day, which is October 10th in 2019. So we're actually now coming up on our 5th birthday as a charity. And we launched our Level Up Mental Health program for the industry very shortly after the charity was founded in 2020. That's now grown. We're partnered with almost 200 companies globally now, and really starting to be in a position where we can properly advocate for and encourage positive change across the industry, even though, as we'll go on to talk about, we have a long way to go. Thank you for the happy early birthday. Even though we have a long way to go, we are starting to be in a position where people are taking note of the issues and are starting to address some of the systemic, long-standing concerns that the industry has had. If we move on to the next page, I don't want to spend too long looking at statistics, but I do think that they can sometimes be helpful just to illustrate the breadth of the issue, especially, me having said that the games industry in particular is not awesome for people's mental health a lot of the time. But also just, I think, acknowledging the impact, the, sort of tangible statistical impact that mental health problems can have is important. So you'll see that there are a few different stats on the screen, which are pretty staggering like they're very big numbers. And I know that I'm hesitant to kind of take something as nuanced and as personal as mental illness and reduce it down to just numbers. But if you're looking at the fact that, 1 billion people live with mental health conditions, and that is just baseline regardless of anything that is exacerbating that or contributing toward making things worse, such as poor working environments. And the cost to the global economy being $1 trillion. I literally can't even comprehend that amount of money, but I think it's important in many cases to acknowledge the sort of economic impact of this kind of thing, because that really does help people take notice in a lot of instances. One other statistic that I like to not like to mention, but that I think is important to mention is from UK's 2022 census, which is that 38% of the games industry live with either anxiety, depression, or both. The national average in the UK is 17%, so that illustrates how this industry is, not typical, I suppose. And That can be for, it's kind of like, I guess, a kind of a chicken and egg situation. Like, I think a lot of people who experience mental illness are drawn to creative pursuits such as video games, such as art, as, you know, an escape, and it becomes very important to them, and that draws them to the industry. But I also think that the industry has a propensity to exacerbate mental health conditions through, you know, kind of the stuff that we'll go on to talk about in a minute, basically. So I'm going to really, really briefly just talk you through what Safe in Our World has done so far before we get into talking about some specific mental health conditions that we see commonly in the industry. I won't read out everything on the screen here, but this is being recorded, and I'm very happy to share the slides after the fact. But in terms of the support that we offer to gamers, if you visit our website, you can find crucial crisis lines, helplines, and resources. We have helplines in over 100 countries, translated into, I think, 12 languages. So if you are in need of support and it's overwhelming to try and find it yourself from just trawling through Google, you can always know that you can visit our website, and all of those details are kept up to date constantly. We have a Discord community. It's just discord.gg/safer together. We're coming up on 2K members now, to be fair, because when we launched our Game Jam event, Mental Health Game Dev Champions, we had a big influx in new members joining. But it's a really nice place to hang out and talk about mental health, and also stay up to date with what the charity is up to. We've worked with companies such as Ubisoft to address issues like toxicity in online gaming. And thank you, Nathan, for popping the links to what I'm saying in the chat. And we have a bunch of other resources, such as our podcast, which you can find on all of the places where podcasts are found. And also Sidekick, a physical mental health journal that we published last year, which you can find more information on our website as well. In terms of the industry, our big program is obviously Level Up, like I mentioned, partnered with, it's over 180 companies now, actually, as well. This has been updated recently, but we have also grown a lot over the last maybe a month and a half, from new connections at Develop, and obviously the Game Jam event and such. But those companies are responsible for over 50,000 employees. So hopefully the work that we are doing is reaching a lot of those people and really supporting them. That's kind of my goal as leader manager of the program. We've also delivered over $250,000 worth of free training to the games industry and the wider community. Our most recent course, A Guide to Self-Advocacy Speaking, is recorded and still available to complete on YouTube. It's one of the best training programs we've ever put on, and I really recommend checking it out if you are at all interested in it. It's really useful. It looks at kind of communicating with greater empathy and understanding, and also being able to identify your needs and kind of request them in such a way that avoids a lot of those common miscommunications and incidents you find in the workplace that just come from personalities clashing with each other. We've also done a lot of work to ensure that marginalized people have access to our training and resources, and we have been lucky enough to try and spread the word about what we do at a whole bunch of different interesting events. Now we're going to get into the sort of the meat of this presentation, I suppose. And I'm going to talk you through the most common mental health conditions that we see in the industry, just to provide a little bit more information around them. I'm sure that all of them probably you've heard of before, but I think it's good to, talk about it, recognize it. It can also really help, if you feel like you know a lot about mental health, either your own mental health or mental health in general, it becomes easier and easier to neglect your own. I find this a lot where I'm, I'll deliver presentations and things, and I'll suddenly, I'll be in the middle of talking and I'll suddenly be like, hey, wait a minute, I'm describing myself right now. So I think it does really help to kind of revisit these topics really often to make sure that they stay front and center of your mind, because it's kind of like, it's like a skill. your well-being and understanding your well-being is a skill that you need to practice regularly so that you have the kind of knowledge and tools that you need to address things when there is an issue. Yeah. Anyway. So, as I mentioned from the Yuki statistic, we will be talking about anxiety and depression because the numbers of people experiencing those in this industry are a lot higher than the average. Anxiety is something that can be extremely normal. It's super normal to feel anxious sometimes about some things, such as before giving a presentation, before a job interview, doing an exam, that kind of thing. And a small amount of anxiety is good for you because it's your body sort of keeping you safe, essentially. Like it's literally your body reacting to a perceived threat. And even though a job interview or something isn't necessarily a threat, it can inspire you, it can give you that drive to sort of perform your best. However, it can become a problem if it starts to become sort of inappropriate for the situation, I suppose. You're feeling too anxious about things that wouldn't normally cause anxiety or shouldn't cause as much anxiety. You know, so for example, if your anxiety is so severe before a job interview or some kind of big situation that it's causing something like a panic attack, or it's causing you to, you know, be unable to engage in that activity, or it's abnormal if, you know, you're feeling anxiety about something that people generally wouldn't feel anxious about, such as, I don't know, going outside, going to the grocery store, talking to another person in a non-like interview kind of situation, all that kind of thing. It is something that it takes a lot of kind of time and understanding to manage. And that's why, you know, as I just mentioned, it's really important to practice your skills of coping with anxiety. It can be really useful to have sort of like a toolbox or a toolkit, whether that's a physical thing or just something you have like in the back of your mind for how to deal with situations when you feel anxious. So just understanding like regulating activities that you can do, grounding techniques, all of this type of stuff. Or it could be, if you have sort of like a physical box, it can have things in it that can help calm you down. So for example, some people like really strong mints or like really sour sweets, something to I guess give your brain something to focus on that isn't the anxiety that it's feeling. It could be, you know, things to fidget with, or it could be things that, you know, bring you peace, activities that you like doing, that kind of thing. Similarly, when we talk about depression, this is something that a lot of people experience for some periods of time. However, it is different than sort of general low mood or being unhappy. As it says there, depression is more than being a bit sad for a few days, although a lot of people can have periods of depression. A lot of times, and this is one of the kind of things that we try to focus on as Safe in Our World when it comes to eliminating stigmas, is the terminology can be trivialized. You've probably heard a lot of people say things like, oh, I'm really depressed about that. And even though it feels like a really small thing, I think language and syntax in that way can be really important in terms of causing people not to acknowledge the severity of a situation or of a condition like this. Depression can affect people in a lot of different ways, and it can cause a lot of different symptoms, and some of these symptoms could be contradictory. So for example, some people who are experiencing depression might be really struggling to sleep, like experiencing insomnia. Some people with depression might be sleeping all the time. Some people with depression might have no appetite and be eating not a lot at all. Other people might eat a lot when they're depressed. I think that to say that even though these things are very contradictory, neither of them are sort of right or wrong ways to feel depression, and it's important to understand the different signs, and that there isn't a sort of one size fits all. Some people, as it says there, might recognize that they're depressed, especially people who suffer with depression as kind of a lifelong condition. You get quite good at identifying, I suppose, the warning signs that you're entering a particularly bad period. But other people might just not realize that they're depressed. Like, they might not recognize that, because things like feeling excessively tired, or losing interest in doing things, and a lot of the initial symptoms can be very innocuous. They can be things that are very easily brushed to the side. But with things like anxiety and depression, the longer that the symptoms go unaddressed, the longer that you go without sort of talking to people and developing those coping skills, the smaller and smaller your world can be, because you stop doing more and more things, whether it's anxiety stopping you from going to events, going outside, wearing certain clothes, like doing certain activities. And depression, it could stop you from also leaving the house, but it could also stop you from doing activities that you previously enjoyed. And it can really, as it kind of erodes away at your life, I guess, like everything to do with your life, it can have a very damaging impact. If you visit our website, we do have a lot more information about things like anxiety and depression, and we also have under the stories tab at the top some personal experience stories that illustrate people who've been through these things, as well as the two topics that I'm about to talk about. And I'd really recommend reading those, because it can really help to understand better when you have that kind of illustrative example and you're hearing it from someone's own experience, I suppose. The next one that I want to talk about is imposter syndrome, another thing that is super prevalent in the games industry. Imposter syndrome is essentially when you convince yourself that you have tricked everyone, that you're a fraud and you don't deserve to be where you are, or have people think of you what they do, and you're kind of almost consumed with the idea that you're going to be found out, and that people will realize that you have tricked them in some way. It could mean that you diminish any of your accomplishments, or it could be that you, I guess, like, throw yourself into work and you feel like you have to try so much harder so that you're not found out, and so that that no one notices that you're a fraud. And this can cause all sorts of problems. Like, it's very much linked to things like anxiety, and it can cause feelings of anxiety when you are always second guessing yourself and always trying to check and see, oh, that person's probably thinking that I'm not worthy of being here, or like, what could I do to prove myself? And imposter syndrome is especially prevalent in the industry, I think, for a few different reasons. Number one, because it's a really cool industry to work in. A lot of people join this industry because they love video games, and they are amazed that they get to work in a field that they really enjoy. And that can make them feel like they maybe don't belong there, and that they're unworthy of being there. You think, like, how did I get so lucky to land this cool job in this cool industry? I must have fooled them in some way, or I must not be worthy of it. And another part of that comes from the industry being how it historically has been. Again, less so now, luckily, but it has been the case where, people are seen as disposable in this industry because it's so competitive. You'd hear phrases like, oh, you're really lucky to have this job, so you better work hard, because, you could be replaced. Like, we could just get rid of you, and there are a million other people who would love to have your job. And the industry has done a lot of work to kind of enforce that feeling of being a fraud on, or like not worthy, on the people who work in it. I think it's also that this industry is a very high pressure industry from like a consumer perspective. You want to prove that you are worthy. You are often dealing with criticism, which can lead to, even though it may not be kind of founded criticism, or a lot of people just say negative things online, it can lead to kind of painting this overall picture for you of you not being worth it, I suppose. Now, the last thing that I want to touch on just now is burnout, which is another thing that we see all the time in this industry. We actually hosted a mental health summit in partnership with BAFTA in June. And one of the sessions on burnout we surveyed the audience of anyone who had experienced burnout in the games industry or was currently in burnout. And over 80% of attendees answered that, yeah, they were burnt out. And I think even though that's kind of a small sample size, it's extremely indicative of how a lot of people in the industry feel. Burnout is something that we talk about all the time in the industry, but that we don't really quite have in terms of actually dealing with it yet. So burnout is more than just being a bit tired and fed up. Similarly to depression, it's a word that can get thrown around a little bit. But it's really important to recognize how devastating burnout actually can be. So as it says on the slide there, it's a state of physical and emotional exhaustion. It's really when you have got past the point that your body can cope, that you can emotionally cope with your situation. It happens after experiencing a prolonged period of stress, or concern, worry, physical or emotionally demanding tasks, duties, roles. And it doesn't just fix itself. Like, it's not something that you can just kind of put up with and it will go away. If you don't deal with it and you get burnt out, or you're approaching burnout and you don't deal with it, it's going to get worse, unfortunately. And I think as well, because similarly to depression, a lot of the symptoms can initially feel quite innocuous. It's not something that people are necessarily very good at recognizing in themselves until they've been through it. I have had this as well in my previous job before I joined Safe in Our World. There was a period of about 6 months where my workload was extremely high, but also there was so much change happening within the organization that was poorly implemented, let's say. So I was kind of going through this like emotional whiplash of like constantly having my job and my duties and how I did things and what was expected of me changed, but also having a really high workload, and it was just like super stressful for like over 6 months. And I experienced burnout in that job, but I didn't recognize or understand that that's what I had experienced until I got this job and I started learning more about burnout, and then obviously eventually delivering my own kind of training on it. And it's wild to me now that I just thought like what was happening to me was not necessarily fine, but like not, I thought it just is what it is. I just thought it was something that I needed to get through. And not something that was sort of directly related to the extreme stress that I had been under. For me, it kind of started with feeling super tired all the time. I also completely lost interest in literally anything. Like, I just wouldn't have the capacity to do stuff after work. I would just lie in bed and stare at the ceiling until I fell asleep. I couldn't even play games, like watch shows. That was even too much, like, for me, like just cognitively for me to like deal with on top of everything else that had happened. I also started to get physically sick, which is a very, very common symptom of burnout and stress. So like hair falling out, like either losing or gaining a lot of weight, things like your skin getting really bad. In the chat, it's something that it's so hard to acknowledge until you start really thinking about it and like doing that kind of self check-in, like that emotional check-in, and understanding what's going on. Like, and even even now, and I do consider myself very good at identifying my warning signs of burnout, because when I got very sick and I ended up having to take time off work for it in that previous job, that was kind of my, I don't know, the point at which I realized I needed to start maybe taking better care of myself and like stepping back a little bit. And then actually a few months later, I ended up leaving that job. Surprise, surprise. And luckily I'm here and this is a lot better now. However, even though you love your job, it doesn't mean that you are immune to burnout. And in fact, it can mean that you are much more susceptible to burnout, because you not only can't switch off, but you kind of don't want to switch off. And you're like always doing stuff, especially in the games industry where a lot of the industry happens online on places like Discord. You're like always available, right? Like you might be using Discord all day for work, but then you're also using it after work, and that the temptation to still look at that stuff is still there. Or like even social media, like it's very, very difficult to switch off from a job like this. You can't just pack up and go home and then not think about it. And also, I'm like, pretty much all of us enjoy playing video games in our free time, and that is still work related, right? Like it's still part of what we do, and it still gets you thinking about the same things. So I really do recommend just having a little check-in with yourself. Like I said, with the other topics, we have much more information on burnout on our website. We also have personal experience stories about burnout that go through that kind of explainer of how it felt. But it is, it's hard to recognize in yourself. Even, I think it was about 2 months ago, I was delivering a full workshop on burnout specifically. And as I was talking, I was like, literally sat there explaining things that I was currently going through. And again, even though I think I'm pretty good at identifying my warning signs, it was in that moment when I was delivering a talk on burnout that I recognized that I was approaching burnout myself. And so again, thankfully, because I'm in kind of a better situation now, I was able to speak to my manager afterwards and say, hey, I really need some time off, actually, because that's what you have to do with burnout, is you have to take time. Like there is no other way to do it. You can't just continue working through it. You have to remove yourself from the situation and rest and reset. And I can see a lot of people in the chat kind of agreeing with that and saying what their like coping mechanisms are. So I really appreciate you all sharing that information. But yeah, I think that those are the 4 conditions we see most commonly. I am going to talk a little bit now around what we can kind of do about these things. Obviously, that is a huge topic, and we do have specific workshops that we deliver on each of those 4 topics separately. So this will be very much a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully it will get you thinking about a few things that you can do, today, now, to support yourself. So number 1 is talk about it. I've kind of touched on this already, but talking about it, doing things like sitting here, explaining how I felt, it helps you to identify. We've literally seen it here today in the chat where, a handful of people have said, actually, I think I might be burnt out, or I might be approaching burnout. So whether that is talking about it like with a friend, or seeking opportunities to enter a discussion about it, like attending training and attending sessions like this, or just advocating for this stuff to be such a normal topic of conversation that you don't have to seek out a space in which you can talk about it. It should just be like normal to be able to say these things. It shouldn't be this taboo, difficult topic. In fact, one of the kind of, I don't know, like, I was going to say game changing, and then I was like, that's really on the nose. But I can't think of another thing to say now. But one of the things that really surprised me when I first joined Safe in Our World was that I was having a team meeting, and we kind of started with the usual, like, how are you all doing kind of situation. And then someone, like one of the members of our team was like, actually, I'm not good. Like, I am not feeling good today. I am having a really bad mental health day. And I was like, whoa, I didn't realize that you could ask that question and not have it be like a formality, like where you don't actually want to know the answer, because you get so used to the the kind of cultural norm being, if someone asks you, are you okay? You say, yeah, how are you? And they say, I'm fine. Like, that's just, it's not really a question. And I think the more that we advocate for proper conversations, and for that, for someone saying, hey, I'm not doing so hot, it's not this like wild thing that derails the entire situation and makes it really awkward and no one wants to talk about it. Obviously, it's something that needs to be addressed, but it's not something that is addressed in such a way that it's like this scary thing that needs to be kind of kept all hush hush kind of situation. And so my second point there is about recognizing wins. This can really help with things like imposter syndrome, especially depression, especially. And the first point I have there is that sometimes it's really hard to remember the cool stuff you've done or the reasons why you're awesome. And it's okay to ask other people for support in confirming that for you until such time as you're able to do it yourself. When you are, in a really bad place, either with depression, anxiety, imposter syndrome, whatever, you might not be able to think of anything good that you've done. And while obviously that's not true, like everyone's done things that are worthy of being proud of, your brain just doesn't let you remember them or recognize them. It filters out the good things. So, ask people and let people know when you are, feeling pretty down about yourself. Like I'll do that to my colleague Rosie and our manager Sarah, like all the time, and they'll do it where I'll send a message and say like, hey, I'm feeling really down about myself today. I'm feeling very like I've got really bad imposter syndrome today. I feel like I'm not good at my job and like I'm stupid, whatever. And then they'll be able to sort of say why that's not the case, essentially. Like, I mean, Rosie and I both in the past have sent each other emails, like itemized emails with receipts of like all of the cool stuff we've done. And that kind of thing can be really helpful. I also really recommend keeping a physical or a digital list. So I have my own personal Discord server that I use. That it's literally just me. And there's a channel in there where I can just post all of my achievements, things that I'm proud of, stuff that I've done, whether it's work related or not. And then when I'm feeling really down, it can really help to have that like empirical evidence, that irrefutable proof that I've done cool stuff. It's also really helpful for things like looking for work, like for job interviews and stuff, to have your successes listed. But mostly I use it for just if I'm feeling down, it can be really nice to be able to look back at that kind of stuff. Yeah, please all use that idea. It's not something that I'm precious about. I know Rosie has one as well, but I really recommend it. And because it's on Discord, because I always like the idea of keeping physical lists, but I never actually do it. But if it's on Discord, because I use Discord for work and for personal stuff, and like I'm kind of there all the time, it's really useful to just be able to quickly drop stuff in, like screenshots, and even just like screenshots of nice things people say to me in emails and stuff like that. It really helps. And then the last one on practicing self-care. Self-care is going to look different for everyone. You might really like a long bath. That might be absolutely not your thing. Your self-care might be, going on a walk. It might be spending time with your cat. There are a lot of different things that it can look like. So I guess just don't feel pressure to do self-care in the correct way or what you believe is the correct way. But also recognize that self-care is intentional. It is something that you have to actively make time for. It's not something that, oh, whoops, my bad. It's not something that you can just kind of, oh, I woke up in time to have a shower before work. That was self-care moment. It might feel good to have a shower, but that's not really self-care. That's like basic human care kind of thing. And what I'm trying to say is try and distinguish those things and make sure that the self-care activity is you specifically making time to do something that you enjoy and that makes you feel calm. And remember that it is not selfish to take that time for yourself. It is ultimately going to enable you to be better and more present for the people that it matters and in the times where it matters, whether that's work or personal life, whatever, family. But it, taking that time away is in itself productive. And even if it doesn't feel productive, like, you don't have to be productive all the time. Like, you can waste in quotation marks, like a few hours, I don't know, playing a game or like doing something that doesn't have like a product at the end of it, I suppose. And you don't always have to be on producing that kind of stuff. So give yourself permission to like be quote unquote lazy every now and then, is I guess what I'm getting at here. I can see a few people in the chat said adding a channel for achievements is mostly my server just sharing files to myself. And yeah, I think just like sending yourself stuff. I mean, that's literally what I do. We do have channels for like wins and achievements and stuff in the Safer Together Discord, in our work Discord, that kind of stuff. But I also have one that is just for me, because like it's important and nice to be able to have those moments for yourself. And also, some of the things that I hold dearly as like evidence that I'm a good person or whatever, like, I don't know, are things that I want to keep personal to myself, right? And then I can see some of the people saying what they've been trying to do to get out of work mode, disengage from stuff. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts and your ideas. And that's what I really love about doing these types of sessions, is that, like, I don't know, like, knowledge sharing aspect of it. Now, I do want to leave some time for questions and input and such things. I have suddenly had like a massive crisis of confidence. I think I have an hour, but please correct me if I'm wrong, or if I'm coming up on time.
You're fine. You have
Okay,
an hour,
awesome.
so
Okay,
don't worry at all. Don't
cool.
rush anything.
That's what I had planned for, but then suddenly I was like, oh, what if I'm wrong and I'm about to get cut off? No, we're all good. Okay.
No, you're good.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, before I finish and we have an opportunity to kind of chat together and I can go over any questions, I just want to talk about how you can get a bit more involved in Safe in Our World, or even just in our overall mission, outside of the charity, how you can be a better advocate for mental health and stuff. So as a company, if you have a company, if you are joining a company, there are a handful of things that you can do. Booking opportunities. I mean, booking like speaker opportunities like this is a really good shout, so that I can, I don't know, talk about mental health all day, every day, like I love to do, and that we can open up these floors and these spaces where people can talk. And thank you. Yeah, so this was at the JAGX offices. I was very thrilled to be able to hold all of the cool swords. You can book some of the other training opportunities that we have on, whether that's the kind of paid stuff that companies normally ask us to put on, or if it is engaging in some of the free training that we offer, such as the self-advocacy one that I mentioned. We also have 3 big fundraisers at the end, we also have 3 big fundraisers each year. Our charity bundle with Fanatical is at the beginning of each year. We're in sort of January, February time, so we're always looking for like donations of games and people to help promote that. And then Play Your Way and Press Pause are our big sort of community-focused fundraisers, which organizations are welcome to participate in as well. But they are mostly done via Tiltify. We have really cool fundraising incentives and rewards and such things. We will be announcing our plans for Press Pause really soon, like literally within the next week. So if you are at all interested in that, our fundraising incentives are so cool, and I'm so excited to talk about it. So keep an eye on, the website, social media, Discord, everything for that, if you're interested. And then also just, talking about us, talking about mental health, signposting to support, whether that is, our Find Help pages, Safe in Our World, or if it is just other resources, other local stuff. Someone said if you change it to press pause PAWS, you can have an excuse to bring in cats and dogs, and I am here for it. I have 2 cats. I also have a tortoise, actually. So don't think that really counts as pause, but here we go. And I am always down for pets being involved in fundraising activities / just seeing photos of pets whenever, all the time. And yeah, just generally encouraging discussions is what I was saying there. Now, as an individual, same sort of thing about talking about us, talking about what we do, talking about mental health in general, that kind of thing. I can't express how important it is. It is one of the greatest privileges in my working life that I have the ability to just talk about mental health all day, every day, because it's something that I have been, advocating for and passionate about for my whole life. But I haven't really necessarily had the stage through which to do it, or oftentimes like the confidence in other situations in which to do it. Even though I've tried and I've made those spaces in some circumstances, but I really encourage, having that bravery where you can, making those spaces where you can. Obviously, as an individual, you can participate in our fundraisers as well. You can introduce us to people or connect us with people or recommend that people talk to us, that kind of thing. That all really, really helps. We're also always happy to look at collaborating with community members on things like those personal experience stories. That is genuinely one of my favorite things that we do as a charity, because I think it helps so much in eliminating the stigma, seeing so many people from all across the industry, different backgrounds, different circumstances, talking about this kind of stuff. But it also, like I said, it really helps to illustrate some of the, I guess, like conditions and things that are a bit more challenging to understand. So like, it's one thing to read, for example, the NHS website on psychosis or PTSD, but if you haven't experienced it or you don't know anyone who's experienced it, that's only going to get you so far. So when you can actually engage with someone's story who has been through that, it can be so much more meaningful and so much easier to kind of not necessarily understand, but at least kind of get your head around it and have that like baseline like empathy kind of situation. You can apply to be an ambassador. Now, we have a class of ambassadors each year, and we open applications in October of each year. So if you are interested in doing that, our ambassadors are people who will do things such as helping represent us at events, helping us do talks, panels, other key volunteering activities based on like different projects that we're participating in. So, for example, some of our ambassadors have been involved in the activity that we're doing for Press Pause, which I can't talk about just yet, but you'll hear about really soon. And really, it's just an opportunity to kind of be an open advocate for us. Like, you don't have to have a particular online presence. A lot of our ambassadors do, stream and promote us on socials and that kind of thing. But it could also be, like more behind the scenes stuff, which is equally useful. Such as helping out with events planning or even like doing more of the kind of industry focused stuff that I do and looking at like resources that we can create together. And then also, our Discord on the screen right there. And yeah, thank you. In the chat there, we do have amazing ambassadors. I am really happy with all of them, really proud of all of them. And yeah, I would really encourage that you apply if you are interested.